The government trapper who took the grizzly knew he had made Escudilla safe for cows. He did not know that he had toppled the spire off an edifice, a building since the morning stars sang together. Escudilla still hangs on the horizon, but when you see it, you no longer think of bears. It's only a mountain now. Aldo Leopold, 1949. Escudilla is the third highest mountain in Arizona at 10,912 feet. From its height, you can see all the way to Flagstaff, 100 miles to the west, and into New Mexico's Gila Wilderness to the east. The upper reaches of Escudilla would have been a grizzly paradise with its pristine, high-elevation meadows and lonely aspect. It was there, in this bear heaven, that the last grizzly bear in Arizona killed itself in the 1930s. The bear, known as Old Bigfoot, tripped a rigged rifle that the government trapper had hidden in a booby-trapped cow carcass. It seemed an almost ignoble ending for a story that began so long before trappers and their rifles stepped onto the scene. No one realized it at the time. In fact, it took 15 to 20 years, but the bear that died on Escudilla that day was the last grizzly in Arizona. Aldo Leopold writes, sadly on the mountain having lost its identity with the death of that bear, but he also writes of the lingering spirit of this great animal. Somehow it seems that the spirit of the bear is still there, prowling the huge meadows, lurking in the thick stands of aspen and spruce, wandering the steep slopes that looking down from is like looking out of a window of an airplane. But no matter how it seems, the fact is that no grizzlies roam Escudilla today, and their absence leaves behind an edifice unadorned. The bureau chief who sent the trapper was a biologist versed in the architecture of evolution, but he did not know that spires might be as important as cows. He did not foresee that within 2 decades the cow country would become tourist country and have greater need of bears than of beefsteaks. Bureaucrats were not the only ones with the problem seeing clearly into their crystal balls. Leopold observed, "The congressmen who voted money to clear the ranges of bears were the sons of the pioneers. They acclaimed the superior virtues of the frontiersmen, but they strove with might and main to make an end to the frontier. The frontier, back when scratching a living out of the land was simply life or death without choices for humans and animals alike. The grizzly roamed over most of the southwest and northern Mexico, places that would become the frontier to the intrepid westward-ho migrants bent on taming this vast territory. As frontier people arrived, they found the grizzly a large carnivore that carried with it tales of human-like deviousness and grudge-bearing that persist today. Organized efforts to destroy the grizzly before it destroyed the new settlers or their livestock were immensely successful in the Southwest. By the early 20th century, grizzly bears were rare or extirpated in many areas. But true to its reputation for tenacity and power, the grizzly lingered stubbornly at the brink possibly into the late 70s, when the last known southwestern grizzly was killed in the Colorado San Juan Mountains in 1979. She represented the final flickering remnant of what was once an edifice of building since the morning stars sang together in the Southwest. When those stars first sang together, no humans were around to hear their music. At that time, there were approximately 100,000 grizzly bears in what would become the lower 48 states, and they ranged everywhere west of the Mississippi and from central Mexico northward to Alaska. At the dawn of the 21st century, there are estimated to be fewer than 1,000 bears in the lower 48 states, and those are confined to the northwestern states in areas that represent less than 2% of the grizzly's original range. But for the humans coming south after crossing the Bering Land Bridge 12,000 years ago, grizzlies meant nature at its harshest and most beautiful, an adornment to the edifice that was all around them. Grizzlies roamed everywhere the new arrivals went, from the mountains of Colorado to the rolling elevations of Chihuahua in Mexico to Escudilla in Arizona. The great bears merited respect and inspired totems and tales. All that changed for the grizzly with the first wave of new settlers in the early 19th century. One account from an early frontiersman described the grizzly as being a fearsome foe to Indians and white hunters alike, saying that although the grizzly avoided humans like other wild animals do, When maddened by love or hunger, he not unfrequently charges at first sight of a foe. Doubtless, this reputation preceded the grizzly as other settlers arrived, all too ready to combat this frightening predator when it challenged their ability to survive by threatening their lives or livelihoods. And combat did ensue. By the early 1850s, grizzlies had already started to disappear. Dick Wooten, a bear hunter who also understood his bears, recorded that grizzlies were beginning to become scarce by the mid-19th century in the Raton Mountains of northeastern New Mexico, where they had once been abundant. Before the end of the century, the grizzly would be gone from much of its original territory. In the beginning of the westward movement, grizzlies could be found primarily in places that offered its favorable habitat, wooded areas interspersed with plenty of meadows and other grassy areas for foraging. The forest serves as cover for them, and montane conifer forests found at high elevations throughout the Southwest provided optimal grizzly cover. These largest North American omnivores seemingly would eat almost anything, from grass to insects to berries to squirrels. They required large ranges in order to eat throughout the season and exploit the different habitats with season-specific food resources. The grizzly lives alone except to mate and can survive up to 30 years or more. Here, already in the West, was a voracious, omnivorous animal capable of killing almost anything for food and exploiting seasonal habitats and requiring a lot of territory to subsist. When westward-bound settlers arrived, they found their direct competition waiting. After all, these people, too, were omnivorous and voracious and would grow to need acres of land for their sheep, cattle, and crops. The players were in place, and the stage set for a clash of two titans. These stories, both tall and true, that the grizzly inspired provided the backdrop for the battle. Lieutenant George Ruxton in 1847 recorded that a grizzly bear, unless it is killed, will administer a hug at close quarters that is anything but a pleasant embrace, his strong hooked claws stripping the flesh from the bones as easily as a cook peels an onion. He added that trappers delighted in telling newcomers bloody grizzly tales to discourage them from ever attacking a grizzly, but their stories may have had the real effect of instilling fear that led to the desire to rid the world of these monsters entirely. There were some who understood the grizzly better than others. Like the previously mentioned Dick Wooten, the 19th century bear hunter, who stated that his experience has been that the bear will always sacrifice his reputation for courage to avoid a conflict with a hunter, provided the hunter makes no hostile demonstration. However, the one thing a grizzly resents very promptly and emphatically is being shot at or threatened with a gun. There are plenty of tales of hunters who shot a grizzly and while tracking the wounded animal were attacked by ambush and maimed or killed. To hunters and ranchers alike, grizzly meant enemy. For bears, the real danger may have been something less than obvious. Sheep. These unassuming animals can take partial burden of responsibility for the loss of so many bears in Texas and the Southwest. Sheep ranchers were especially protective of their flocks and had strong negative attitudes towards predators. During the period of the most intense sheep farming, from about 1885 to 1905, the numbers of sheep grazing increased along with the numbers of homesteaders and settlers, and during this 20-year period, the Southwest lost most of its grizzlies. The federal government also helped on behalf of ranchers, using poison to control predators indiscriminately, although in some places like West Texas, the target was really the wolf. The strychnine-laced bait worked not only on wolves, but on any animal that ate it, and the use of government-approved poison bait is another culprit in the decline of the grizzly and other carnivores in the Southwest. But sheep and poison don't get the blame entirely. Hunting for sport or money also claims some of the burden for the disappearance of the Southwest's biggest predator. Some men made it their life's work to seek and destroy as many bears as they could, and perhaps no one person had a greater hand in the bear's demise as did Ben Lilly, the archetypal southwestern grizzly hunter. Although he did not kill every grizzly that died at the end of a hunter's knife or gun, he fired ambition in other hunters and did manage to take out a great many bears himself. Ben Lilly was born in 1856 and grew to attain status as the greatest bear hunter of all time. His attachment to killing bears was so strong that the U.S. government fired him from his job as a mountain lion killer because he spent too much time hunting bears instead. According to his own estimates, he killed almost 50 bears a year. The story of large predators throughout the world is a sad one, as many of them struggle to keep their place on a planet dominated by human beings. Yet much research has been done in the modern age to prove the importance of large predators to our overall ecosystems, especially in terms of preventing overgrazing from other animals, which causes desertification and hydrological destruction. We are also learning new techniques and have new technologies that better help human civilizations coexist with animals like bears and wolves. There are success stories of reintroduction of predators to their former ranges, and one of those successes has been the reintroduction of the Mexican gray wolf in eastern Arizona. In 2019, the Center for Biological Diversity lobbied the federal government to consider the reintroduction of the grizzly bear to some of their former ranges here in Arizona. They suggested the Mogollon Rim and Gila Wilderness as possible habitats to bring them back. While bringing back large predators to their former ranges here in Arizona faces huge amounts of resistance from the likes of hunters, ranchers, land developers, rednecks, and state officials, it is still something worth continuing to pursue. As time goes on, the older generations move on as well, and their preconceived notions go with them. Humanity evolves in the way we live, and our previous ignorance gives way to scientific facts and a new, more holistic perspective. Maybe there will be a day in the future where the grizzly once again stands as a spire of an edifice, a building since the morning stars sang together. Maybe one day we will look at Escudilla and think grizzlies again.